All right, everybody, thanks so much for coming. What I want to do first is to tell how we're going to run this thing. And what's going to happen here is, first, we're each going to introduce each other. Then, we're going to talk about our books. But then, after I talk about my book, I'm going to do the first reading from it. Then we're going to alternate back and forth and do 3 different readings. And then at the end, hopefully take some questions and or comments. All right? Thank you. All right, so first of all, one more thing. Rachel will pass around this list, and this is for when the books actually do come out. We will not email you till the books come out. And then at that time, if you make it an email, if you so desire. So this is Rachel Spring. She has written for many years and is the author of a published short story in an anthology called Beginnings. Rachel has a BA in early childhood education and an MA in counseling psychology. Her master's thesis was written on the complexities of the mother-daughter relationship.
Great. And this is Andee Baker, also known as Andrea Baker, who is a sociologist who switched from essay writing as a teen to academic writing for a long while. Now she's back to crafting the word for popular audiences. She's written 2 books, one an early study of 80 couples who met online, and the other on fans and fan communities dedicated to the Rolling Stones. Several copies of the Stones book, Get What You Need, are available here if you want to look through and purchase. Recently, Andee won a prize in the annual nonfiction contest run by the Santa Fe Reporter. Andee and I met at what was then called the Taos Writers Conference about 4 years ago. She was still living in Ohio at the time, and I in Santa Fe. We hit it off right away, as we have similar family backgrounds, and are both interested in the written word. Andee now lives in Santa Fe with her cat, Sunny, and I still live here with my cat, Benjamin. I believe the deep desire to share our lives with others is what brought us here today.
All right, about the book. My book is called, at least at this point, Mick, My Men and Me. Does everybody know who Mick is?
Oh,
Maybe not. Right,
Rolling Stones?
Mick Jagger. Okay, my book combines my experience with men with my growing feminism, tracing my childhood as a bookish yet curious kid, through falling through the cracks at school, through finally obtaining a PhD. I come of age when the Beatles and the Rolling Stones hit the American scene, though the Stones captured my deeper imaginings. I turned my boy craziness since kindergarten into the search for a compatible man, becoming liberated from a Midwestern background in the journey toward independence. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones prompt my separation from traditional roles, and the Stones continue to play a part in each of my relationships as the soundtrack of my life. Picture a more relationships-oriented Fear of Flying, written by the sexually adventurous novelist Erica Young, with a dash of sexual politics by the activist political scientist Kate Millett, recast nearly 50 years later by a rock and rolling sociologist. Reading 1, prologue. Just my imagination. Me and Mick in New York. Waiting to catch a glimpse of Mick Jagger, I stand here in New York City, the entertainment capital of the world, on the Upper West Side on 75th between Broadway and Amsterdam. Police have herded about 50 of us across the street from the stage door of the Beacon Theater onto the sidewalk on a crisp fall day, the 1st of November, 2006. After 20 minutes or so, I notice a tall, slender brunette approaching the backstage door. I shout, "Lorraine! Hi, Lorraine!" until she turns to acknowledge me with a wave. No one else shows signs of recognizing her from her longtime relationship with Mick. Yes, finally! Cheers erupt as Mick emerges from his chauffeur-driven vehicle and makes his way to the edge of the sidewalk to give us fans a few minutes of his time. He waves and seems to smile right at me. He might remember my black cowboy hat with the stone's tongue. Hey, let me try to get more to the front to catch a better look. I move from the middle to the far left edge of the small crowd. Searching with his eyes, his hands shading them from the sun, he finds me there and gives me a direct, questioning look, like, "What are you doing? I lost you there for a second." Wow, I shrug, grinning, ecstatic. Well, okay, why shouldn't he know me after attending a bunch of recent shows up close? Still, to visibly show his recognition of me, hey. Other fans have told me about these moments, and now they are happening to me. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Early chapter, before they make me run, reading, writing, and boys. Why I like school so much is I was left alone there, except for a pat on the head or a good job once in a while. I remember I had the task of erasing the boards for one grade. An honor, I thought. I had a few blips, the first in nursery school, what they called state-supported daycare back then. The gray-haired teacher in charge, Miss Massey, by the way, all names are changed to protect the guilty. Miss Massey more than once dragged me by my hair to take me somewhere to a different room, away from the other kids. After I told my parents, even I knew this poor reporting, they took me out of there. While in nursery school, I never wanted to take naps, learning to keep myself very still so as not to get caught and admonished for not sleeping. In kindergarten and first grade, I remember watching kids cry to escape from getting their shots or eating their asparagus. I was too proud. I think that's when I started studying group behavior as a budding sociologist. The next blip came in third grade when Miss Tate caught me talking in class. I had a friend in the next row over, one seat ahead of mine. I guess I was commenting on what was going on, but Miss Tate thought for sure I was talking about her. I didn't stop when she paused. She took me to the far back corner of the classroom and brought out the dunce cap, a large white Pinocchio-like chapeau. This was meant for the dumb kids, not me, wasn't it? Now, apparently, I had shifted my sharp, acutely aware, always on top of the assignments role for the clueless student who has to wear the stigmatizing hat. My classmates approached me at recess to ask what the heck had happened. A traumatic occasion, I used it in a workshop when the family therapist, John Bradshaw, instructed us to go back to our younger selves to talk to them about what they could do differently, how not to cave into our worst feelings. Everything will be fine, I consoled my mini-me. At least in school, anyway. And by the way, try not to irritate the authority figure.
So my memoir, it's called An Unkindness, a speculative memoir, is written as a fantasy piece to show my personal journey of the feminine, some say the heroine. In using the genre of fantasy, the facts of my life and the world of intuition and dreams are woven together. I call myself Raven, in this memoir, my actual middle name and muse. The term "an unkindness" is used in the title. It refers to a flock of ravens, as well as a commentary on my family life. Amongst many things in this memoir, the primary relationship between parent and child, as well as the realized relationship to self, is addressed. Mingled in is the ancestral wound that runs through all our lives. I will read passages from my work that illustrate the primary relationships in my life and how they have over time changed. The first passage addresses Raven's, i.e. my relationship to parents and self in early childhood. The second passages address Raven's first meeting of her mother and father in person and the ability she carries to deny reality. The third and final passage describes Raven's awakening to the revelation of her ancestral wound. From the beginning of my memoir, we are in another world. In this memoir, there are really three worlds: my own personal experience, the non-magical world Raven lives in called Otherworld, and the magical world of Hode. First, early childhood in the non-magical world of Otherworld. I am Raven. This is the story of my awakening. It begins when most children believe they are adults, but in reality are still children. At 15, I was living with my grandmother in my quiet land of Otherworld. We resided in a tiny cottage outside a small village. The land about the cottage was covered with cornfields and apple orchards. When I was young, I thought little of having my grandmother as both my mother and father. But as I grew older and heard my schoolmates speak of their parents and the descriptions of their family life, I began to wonder why I had no parents. Where were they? Were they dead? How had they died? And on and on. Once I tried asking my grandmother some of these questions, but she averted her eyes with a small sigh and changed the subject. Being the child I was, I started making up my own tales about their absence. I often fell asleep in the middle of creating yet another epic saga of how and why my parents were missing. The stories I dreamed into being were full of their immense love for me and their great sorrow when they had to leave me. In my child's mind, the only reason a parent would abandon their child was because of some great sacrifice they had to make or events occurring beyond their control. The stories always ended the same way. My dearest mother would appear at my door one day and with a great sigh would embrace me, her long lost and only beloved daughter. While she held me in a warm embrace, she would whisper, "I will never be separated from you again, my dearest. I love you and always will." Then Father would appear with some lovely gift wrapped in silver with a giant red bow. He'd place the box at my feet, and as my mother released me, he would sweep me up into a cave-like embrace and laugh and laugh. These dreams, though entrancing, somehow always left me with an aching need where my heart belonged.
Reading 2,000 light years from home, Charlie, the man on the white horse. I threatened to leave my husband Charlie after a few years, but not out loud. He'd say, "You'll never leave because you wouldn't know what to do," meaning I couldn't make my own way without him. Maybe he thought I would curl up in a ball, huddle in a corner until I withered away, or he hoped I would anyway. I was the one who was planning my escape. Should I run away in the middle of the night? Or should I run away with another man? Or should I just tell him, "Bye-bye, it's over now"? Before I met Charlie back in the late 60s, I was hanging out at O'Grady's on Milwaukee's Fargo Street where the band The Shags played. A favorite spot for college kids before settling down, the smoke-filled club had very dim lighting, posters of bands on the walls, and when the music started, a psychedelic aura. One night, a couple of guys approached me, introducing themselves as Brent and Brian. These slightly older grad students didn't seem exactly my type, but they told me they had just the man for me. Their pal Charlie and I and the boys met for dinner. They all drank quite a bit, Charlie more than anyone, and from then on, we weren't apart much. I worried that he had a drinking problem, but no, that was just ale by association, increased consumption when going out with his buddies. They were right about the two of us. We made a good match at the time anyway. We both had intellectual dads, though his had the credentials, mine lacked. Both of us were the oldest, he with the younger sister, and me with the two much younger sibs, a miscarriage goofing out the careful spacing between the first and second. Both of us were and are the take charge types, him more than me, both fire signs, his even stronger than mine, Aries the ram over Sagittarius the centaur. He wanted a companion. Yeah, me too. When Charlie's parents first met, his mom Cora had started her master's in physics, while his dad Duncan worked on his doctorate in chemistry. She had gone to Barnard College, the sister school of his university, Columbia. One guess which one dropped out to marry and start a family, going on to run the PTO and the music parents. If two people could be more dominant, more domineering than my parents, here they were. Charlie drove us across the eastern half of the U.S. to meet them. We were all supposed to go hiking in the morning and swimming in the ocean, but Cora didn't have to go. She was busy cooking and cleaning. She found enough time, though, to take me shopping for the bathing suit I didn't bring, my first excuse for not wanting to take the plunge into the Atlantic. It was a one-piece, dark pink on the top, with an attached cranberry-colored skirt, with those thin spaghetti straps, I recall. I didn't want it, but she insisted.
In the first passage, I described Raven's childhood in the land of Otherworld. In the second passages, I speak of Raven meeting first her mother, then her father, and her denial of who these people really are. First, meeting Mother in the magical world of Hode. A song, familiar and terrifying, wrapped around me. I couldn't get away from it. It surrounded my body and enveloped my mind. It haunted my fingers and toes and set my hair on edge. It wound its lingering tendrils inside my muscles, my nerves, insinuating itself into my very bones until I longed to scream for release. All blue, filtered under my eyelids, dancing black stars. Then it was no more. Coming to, I lay quite still, afraid I might once more be overcome by the blue nightmare. But nothing more came. I suddenly thought to myself, I'm starving. Well, you should be, a voice rasped. Come eat. I straightened and wondered how this somehow familiar voice could have heard my unspoken thoughts. By the stove stood a woman in a brown cotton dress and flat brown shoes. Her greasy brown hair was chopped short, as though she had cut it herself with a dull knife. As I approached the table, unsure what to do next, the woman turned, and for a split second, I felt a thrill of connection and terror run through me. The hollow pain in my chest threatened to tear me in two, then turned away again. I slid noiselessly onto the chair's hard seat. My name is Drusinda, stated the woman through pressed lips. Oh, that's odd, I replied. My mother's name is Drusinda. Her face showed no expression. I went on, my name is, I felt a small blue tendril release my mind, and suddenly I remembered everything. Raven. Drusinda turned away from me and made a strange gurgling noise. Second, meeting Father in the non-magical world of Otherworld. The hollow mentioned in this passage is the portal between the two worlds of Otherworld and Hode. I heard the footsteps as I sat by the lip of the hollow. Looking up, I saw Peter, the man who had started showing up at my place of solace for the past few months. He seemed more gawkish than usual. As he stood there saying nothing, he began to sway back and forth in his huge boots, humming a tuneless something. I suddenly felt more nervous than usual. Peter, how are you? I started, trying to ignore his behavior. Ah, all the best last. 'Tis a blessed day it is. His accent, along with his stance, had changed to somewhat foreign to me. Do you need to sit? I asked cautiously. Ah, indeed, lass. I'm sure I do, he slurred. Then sat by me quite suddenly. It felt too close. He'd stopped wearing his cap he'd worn all winter now the weather had warmed. His large ears had turned a bright crimson and his breath smelled like a well-used barn. I said nothing for a while. The ominous silence finally moved me to stand, thinking I should just leave him be. But as I started up, he grabbed me by the arm and pulled me back down. I landed in an awkward position. I tried to sit up, but suddenly he was on top of me, his body pinning me to the earth. Tree roots dug into my back. I cried out once, then he covered my mouth with his. The taste of ferment and rot choked me to stillness. After a bit, he groaned, then fell off me and into sleep. I lay a while, then jumped up and grabbing my things, I ran and ran and ran over the fields, down the road, up the pathway to home. Ravens flew behind me in their unkindness, crying, outrage, betrayal.
Reading 3, Dancing with Mr. D, Donnie the Dog, player of women on guitars. A man with the same nickname as his dog? Really? Yes, they were both Lucky Dog, the human also known by me as Dog, or Lucky if I felt particularly affectionate, or by his given name, Donnie. Dog and man, animals both. Aren't we all? This person might have been the wildest of my sex maniac men, as I call him, very oriented towards sexuality above all other pastimes, except possibly music. He wants to dress me up? Okay. He wants to dress me down? Sure. He wants to make movies of the two of us having sex? Okay, I'm game as long as they stay between us before phone or online videos became common. Wait, he wants to do what? No. Toward the very start of our several-year liaison, after I answered his online ad, he told me he felt a spark when we spoke on the phone. When we met, that was there. He was a bass player in a soft rock band, a side gig to his day job as a telephone customer service rep. He noticed that I pulled on his belt at his house, a provocative gesture he felt that I did almost involuntarily. I knew he was a musician from his ad, where he carried his instrument as if playing it, wearing shades and a black hat. My brother saw the ad a couple of years later and said, wow, impressed, or acted as if he was. Looking further into the origins of our conflicts, when I reread the ad later on, I saw something that as a student of online relationships should have triggered a warning. Apparently, I let my reptile brain slide past that. He wasn't really looking for a girlfriend, but a bandmate, female. Turns out, he already had a girlfriend. Describing himself the first time we met offline as like Tom Hanks' character in Big, I knew later I should have paid more attention to that film rather than half watching it online next to a friend who really wanted to see it. Pondering his behaviors further, like his chronic lateness, I recalled that Donnie said he had the emotional maturity of a 12-year-old boy. That's funny, I thought, chuckling. Donnie then added, well, maybe an 8-year-old. Interlude. Love is strong, watching the band. Before I read this last little part, I thought I'd let you see what I might wear to a Stones concert. It's my guess. Donnie never went to a Stones show with me, although we did watch some of their videos and listen to a lot of old blues music. We saw B.B. King and John Hammond Jr. walking out on an outdoor show at Buddy Guy's when he left the stage to let his backup band play for a good 45 minutes. Donnie and I once tuned in to catch the Rolling Stones do a couple of tunes on a live music award show on TV when they were a bit off their game. Mick occasionally glanced at his guitar-playing bandmates, appearing to ask, along with us, what the fuck is going on? When he heard a few obviously off-key chords. Hoping to show off my band to Donnie, I was embarrassed for them.
In the first passage, I describe Raven's childhood. In the second passages, Raven is introduced to her parents. In this final passage, I describe Raven's awakening to her life and her ancestral wound. Finale in the magical world of Hode. A terrible cackle sounded from above me. Glancing up, I saw the monster who had been tormenting me and my grandmother for what seemed a lifetime. The one who tortured and ultimately killed my grandmother with her insatiable need. From her gangrenous mouth came such a sensuous yet most disturbing blue sound. Drusinda, she hissed toward a dark corner of the labyrinth. Show our guests the honored one. The woman who dragged me across the countryside to this beast's lair, the one with my mother's name, slithered out from a dark corner, dragging behind her a bundle bound in white thread. Making her way to the middle of the hall, she dropped the bundle to the ground with a grunt. Her eyes met mine. Holding my gaze with a gesture sure and swift, she sliced open the dirty bundle with a jagged fingernail. Upon the floor spilled the body of my dearest grandmother, naked and filthy. The beast hissed, ah, here lies the body of my own daughter, Serinda, mother to my dearest Drusinda, and oh, so deliciously, your own grandmother, dear Raven. She bobbed in her web, her hissing growls rocking her grotesque body back and forth. Slowly my mind took hold of the thing's words. Quietly, the horror wrapped itself about me. You, I whispered, you are my great-grandmother? I looked into the bulbous eyes of the beast. Nausea threatened to overcome me. You are Drusinda's grandmother, Serinda's mother, I continued. That means Drusinda is my mother? You are my mother? I turned toward the woman, panting over my grandmother's dead body. My breath stilled and the pain in my chest turned from a dull ache to fire. Pictures flew through my maddened mind of the childhood tales I had created about this woman. She was my unknown beloved mother, The one who I had created to love me unconditionally. The one who, when she returned to me, would take me into a warm embrace and never let me go again. The one, the only one who could make all my blue nightmares flee. The betrayal complete, a fear and rage I had never recognized rose in me. No, I screamed aloud. No, it cannot be. Long-held tears of lifelong pain coursed down my hot cheeks. I felt my chest threaten to burst and struggled against my bones. No, no. The beast was only playing with me. You lie. It cannot be true. And that's the end of it. So yes, thank you for coming, first of all. And just wanted to open it to, we have cookies and water over there for more informal questions if people wish to do that, but does anybody have any questions, as Andee said, comments, whatever, for either of us right now? Yes?
Question, Rachel, you create this wonderful interworld structure, and I'm just wondering, as you did this, did you have inspiration from other writers? What sort of drew you into creating this particular world?
I am a huge lover of Tolkien, first of all, and when I first started writing this story 7 years ago, and I didn't think of it as a memoir, so I love the world, the genre of fantasy, and it gives so much room for characters and, you know, coming and going in ways that, you know. So I then, as time has gone by and both my parents died, and it just kind of morphed in my mind to like, oh, this is my life. And so I took the characters in the worlds, but the feeling of all that is my experience, and the rest of it is kind of like, let's make this an interesting fantasy experience, right? So, yeah.
Andee? So why have the Rolling Stones stayed together for so long?
Yeah, good one. All right, here's my theory. They started out when they were so young, they just really don't know anything else. That's one of my theories. And then the other thing is, as various people came and went, the three people who were in it since 1963 just managed to overcome conflicts. The one guy, the drummer, he's just like, hey, I live on a farm out in the country. I've been married to one woman all my life. You know, I'm more of a jazz person than a rock and roller. So whatever you two want to do, you know, I'm just trying to keep out of your hair, you know, except for maybe helping with the design of the stage. The other ones, I've written a little bit about the conflicts between Mick and Keith, and somehow they just, maybe even sometimes after a year or two or three or four, they resolve those conflicts and just keep coming back to perform because they love it, I think. I don't think they need the money by now. Thank you.
Andee, why did the grad students think that you were good for their friend, Charlie, in
Yeah.
the bar? What was it about you? Or?
Yeah, it was weird. In this bar, I think it was partly the way I was dressed, rather conservatively, I don't know. As I remember, I think I was wearing like a brown wool jacket and a black or brown skirt and maybe boots. And then they just started talking to me and decided, since their friend was a very shy person and yet a very intellectual person, they thought I would be just the woman to bring him out of his shell. And I think that turned out to be true. Thank you.
Let me just ask you about, I really enjoyed the juxtaposition of the two readings, because I felt like I was just kind of time shifting into different worlds and so forth. So that was actually great.
Oh, good, good. I think that was really good. You're trying to keep everyone on their toes.
It was terrific. Let me just ask you about the business of all this. When do you suppose these will be finished? Do you go about shopping them? Are you going to self-publish? What's going to happen?
I personally, and Andee probably is a different path, but I've never done any of the business, and so I'm really confounded by the whole thing, first of all. And I think the easiest in a sense would be to self-publish, and I know people who have done it, so I have like names. But of course, pride-wise, I would love to like have an agent, people adoring me. You know?
Yeah.
I just don't know that that's going to happen. So.
And then for me, I feel I have a new sense of determination, even though I had one book published through a friend of an academic I knew and who knew a publisher, and another one had a different story. But I feel energized by meeting a writer, mentor, teacher recently. So I feel not that she can help me get a real publisher or something, but I feel that's what I might go for a while. I'm projecting, it's probably overly optimistic, that I finish mine maybe by the end of the winter, let's say. So, yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah, I was just going to add one other thing.
Yeah.
Rachel's thing, to me, if I was to hold the book, I would almost picture illustrations.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I wish
Because,
that
like
I
Tolkien,
had that.
it's
yes.
so evocative of seeing that.
Very much
And,
so.
and of course with Andee's, I'd love to see pictures.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I
Yeah,
could
but illustrations for
find
your
somebody.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Line drawings and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
as far as photographs, I do know a couple people who might give me permission so I wouldn't have to pay huge amounts of money. But does everybody know in town here we have this famous rock photographer, Baron Woolman? But anyway, he was the first official photographer for Rolling Stone magazine, and he's been nice enough to give me a few of his old ones as far as permissions. Yeah.
My question was pictures of you in the brown jacket, in the brown skirt.
Maybe a drawing.
I want to see that picture with that young.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And do you have any insight into where or Nick gets all that energy from?
You know what? This is a cool thing. I found out once I started studying the fans, because, you know, I had an interest in them since, you know, the beginning, but I hadn't really gotten that acquainted with their backgrounds. Mick grew up with a phys ed teacher for a father who had him doing push-ups before he could even go out, you know? So he's been training, he's used to this. And I mean, his voice, and you could say, he never had one of the great classic voices, but this man has kept a lot of his voice through vocal training, through physical working out. So I think it's partly inborn, but partly a matter of discipline and training. Yeah.
And some
Some
And some genetics. Yeah.